I've not seen the movie yet, Hacksaw Ridge, but I'm captivated by the storyline. The movie tells the true story of Desmond Doss, a devoted member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He refused to bear arms in World War II and was given conscientious objector status. But he asked to serve as a medic and was deployed with the 307th Infantry in the summer of 1944. He served as a combat medic in Guam and in the Philippines before that fateful battle at Hacksaw Ridge. In the spring of 1945, U.S. forces had taken the 400-foot-high Hacksaw Ridge in their push to capture the city of Okinawa. But on Saturday, May the 5th, the Japanese mounted a vicious counterattack. Officers called for immediate retreat. Every able-bodied man escaped back down the ridge, except for one. One lone soldier disobeyed orders and made his way back into the line of fire. Desmond Doss refused to leave the ridge while he could still hear the crying voices of the abandoned wounded soldiers dying around him. Over the next 12 hours, Desmond put his life on the line as he carried and dragged one man after another to the edge of the cliff. There he fashioned a pulley system using a tree stump as an anchor and lowered them 35 feet down to the next safe ledge. Then he went back for another wounded soldier until he had rescued 75 men from the enemy's reach. For his heroism under fire, President Harry Truman awarded Corporal Desmond Doss the Congressional Medal of Honor, one of just 431 such medals awarded among the 16 million men who served in World War II. In the history of the U.S. Army, he is one of only two conscientious objectors to ever receive this commendation for bravery. A few years before he died in 2006, Desmond was interviewed about his experience that long, dark night. And here was his reply: "I was praying the whole time. I just kept praying, Lord, please help me get one more." I've been thinking about his story and that prayer for the past few months, preparing for this conference. His story reminds me of Jesus' words in Luke chapter 15. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? For the past 12 months, we've been ministering together under a new name with the same mission. The Crossroads District stands on the shoulders of almost 175 years of faith-filled Wesleyan ministry here in Indiana. And we exist for one purpose: to glorify God by making disciples who multiply disciples and congregations until the Wesleyan Church has a transforming presence in every zip code. If that's our business, it's only fair to ask, how's business? Annual reports matter. Thank you to each one of you who filled yours in on time. We count people because people count. These reports don't tell the whole story, but they do give us a snapshot view of our current reality. Together, our church has reported 1,169 professions of faith, celebrated 567 baptisms, and gathered 13,821 people for worship on an average weekend. Those are significant numbers. Sadly, those totals are all down from last year. Attendance was down 3%. Conversions and baptisms were both down 10%. The vital signs are not good. While a few of our churches had difficult situations that impacted our totals, the sad reality is that 71 of our 110 churches declined by at least one in worship attendance. For 38 of those churches, it was a second consecutive year of decline. Only 28 churches grew by one or more in average attendance. Even more telling is that 16 of our churches reported no professions of faith, and 40 churches did not baptize a single new believer last year. please hear this with all the kindness that I could muster. But if the church you are pastoring had no professions of faith and no baptisms this past year, please call your church to prayer and fasting. We cannot be content with barrenness. Another reality we're facing is our aging ministerial corps, our congregations, and even our facilities. Now, I know I'm getting old. My children remind me of it frequently. But 40 of our lead pastors are older than I am. And more than half of our pastors are eligible for AARP. And 20 of our pastors, lead pastors, are 65 years of age or older. I thank God for our senior ministers. I thank God for people like Dwayne Seitz, who at 82 says, sign me up for 2 more years, boss. Let's go for it. So this is not about ageism. This is about a reality that the median age of our pastors is 54, and the median age of our state is 38. And that's a problem. 20 of our aging churches average fewer than 25 in worship attendance. 20 churches, less than 25. Some of these valuable but vulnerable congregations are only 2 or 3 funerals away from closing. The reality is that the district doesn't close churches, contrary to popular opinion. Churches close themselves. Churches close themselves through years of decisions that were increasingly focused on the needs of the members rather than on reaching the lost. We as a district team are committed to helping existing churches address these realities and chart a path forward. In fact, this year we had more resources committed, as Pastor Chris mentioned. We had more resources committed and available for church revitalization than we had churches willing to welcome a consultation team. There is help available when your church is ready to call. Aging congregations is one compelling reason why we must plant churches, but the most important reason that we must plant new churches is that it's the most effective means of evangelism. I've heard it for years, but our own statistics bear it out. The newest 6 churches in our district, they were planted in the last 10 years, reported professions of faith and baptisms at 3 times the rate of our older congregations. Even factoring in their larger size, and they are 80% larger on average, those 6 churches, than our established churches. Even factoring out the size, they are still 50% more effective on those 2 measures than our long-established churches. I want you to watch this video and just catch a heartbeat of our church planters, why what they do is so important and why we support them.
It's an exciting time to be part of the Crossroads District and the multiplication processes that are happening, from what's happening in South Bend to Paradox in Westfield to Rethink that's in Maryville to what's happening in Muncie, and all the different places that God is beginning to bring people and call people. And to realize that it's about churches that are being a part and jumping on mission to be able to help. Like with Rethink, what we have going on right now is we're sharing worship leader, we're sharing resources, and we have people who are going over there on Saturday nights to be prayer partners and who are praying as a part of their services, and small groups that are part of work teams. And I know that we're not the only church that's doing that for churches like Rethink or Paradox or others. It's an incredible opportunity for us as a district to come up together to realize that we all have a part to play in reaching those 100 new kingdom communities in 10 years. And to think about even the revitalization efforts that are happening at churches like Expansion in Chesterton and other places where churches are realizing that we can do more together than we can apart. To know that there are 3 million people, 3 million reasons in Indiana, and we have a part to play. And no matter how big the church is, no matter how small the church is, there are incredible opportunities around our area to jump in and be a part of, because it's all of us working together that's going to make those 100 communities launch with the wind of the Spirit behind us. And I can tell you the wind is blowing, and we get to capture that and move forward together. It's an incredible time to be a part of the multiplication movement for our district.
My husband John and I planted Waterline Church about 7 years ago in the Noblesville Fishers area. And I actually grew up in this district. and have been in many of the churches within our district. And I'm so excited about the multiplication effort that we're putting forward to planting 100 churches in the next 10 years. Our church planting journey was so exciting, and I'm super excited to see that type of multiplication continue to ripple throughout our district and seeing churches and communities and lives change through this mission and this movement.
You know, when I think of the movement of church planting and multiplication, it's just not this thing that's out there in the air. I think of the faces and the names of those people that have been impacted over the years of planting churches and multiplying churches across our district and across our movement as a denomination. Obviously, for me, that's incredibly personal. I think of one face and name comes to my mind that 10 years ago, before the river existed, didn't have a relationship with Jesus, and that'd be my older brother, who this past April went to be with Jesus. 10 years ago, he wasn't walking with the Lord, and I planted the church with this idea that we would reach people who were far from God, and little did I know that I'd have the privilege of walking my brother into a life of faith, and then eventually, just a few short years later, see him get married, and then unfortunately have the sad part of saying goodbye, but the hopeful part of helping him experience victory in death and a new life as he walks and talks with Jesus today. I don't think you could ever put a price tag or a value monetarily, or even when it comes to your time, on multiplication, because the lives and the people that will reach and that will continue to be reached across all of Indiana and eventually across our nation and around the world is monumental. And I'm just excited to be able to play a small part in that in our local church as we continue to see people give their life to Jesus.
We want every church to win. Every existing church can be healthier. Every existing church can reach people for Jesus, but we also need to plant churches. Our problem has not been that we don't have good churches. The problem is we have 3 million people who need Jesus. And so I'm grateful for our zones that are leading the way in planting new congregations, with grand openings scheduled this fall for Maryville and Westfield. They've gotten off to a good start, but they're doing their grand openings in the fall. And we have new teams preparing for launch next spring in Fort Wayne, Muncie, and South Bend, and you'll be meeting those leaders later this morning. By this time next year, we are working toward the goal of introducing 10 new church planting teams to join us in the harvest field here in Indiana. You see, we cannot keep doing what we've been doing and suddenly expect different results. Catherine Booth said, if we are to better the future, we must disturb the present. And my heart has been disturbed this year. Well, just as a doctor checks a few vital signs for an overall sense of your health, two of the most clear signs, or clearest vital signs of a healthy church, are professions of faith and baptisms. The good news is that according to those metrics, some of our churches are thriving, and we want to celebrate that. A conversion rate of at least 10% of your worship attendance is one indicator of health that we'll be watching. At that rate, it still takes 10 people in your congregation 12 months to reach one person for Jesus. Like 10% sounds aggressive, but it takes 10 people 12 months to reach one person for Christ at that rate. 13 of our church saw professions of more than 20% of their worship attendance. Cicero United, Winchester Union Street, Huntington Etna Avenue, Delphi Union Street, Chesterton Expansion, Gas City Eastview, Kokomo Trinity, Tipton Trinity, Marion the River, Plymouth Shiloh, Larwill Fishers Waterline, and Marion Hillside. And a baptism rate of at least 5% of your worship attendance, or at least 50% of the recorded professions of faith, is another helpful measure to track whether people making decisions are following through with definite steps of faith. The churches that doubled that 5% benchmark this year were the following: Huntington, Etna Avenue, Marion Hillside, South Bend Sunlight, Chesterton Expansion, Frankfurt First, Tipton Trinity, Albion, Cicero United, and Sheridan Six Points. Now, if you have professions of faith without next steps of obedience, you have a problem. If you have baptisms without growth in your attendance, you have a problem. And discipleship is the answer. And thank you so much, Pastor Alex, for that reminder yesterday. Paul's words to Timothy are still our mandate. The things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. Our mission is clear: to make disciples who make disciples and trust God to build his church. Frankly, if any church in your community is reaching lost people for Christ, I believe you can too. If the Methodists, the Nazarenes, the Christian Church, or the Assemblies of God can build a life-transforming ministry in your city, I believe you can too. As our friend Paul James likes to say, if corn grows on one side of the road, it will grow on the other side of the road. Unless everyone in your region already knows Christ, your work is not done. That prayer that Desmond Doss prayed that long, dark night, Lord, please help me get one more. I want that to be our prayer this year. There are still more than 3 million people in our state who are religiously unaffiliated. Have you noticed that some of the lights up here are lit and some of them are not? Have you been wondering, did we buy that many faulty light bulbs? What happened with that? If you count, there are 50 lampstands up here. 20 of those lampstands are lit, representing approximately 2 million people, but 30 of the lampstands aren't. 100,000 persons per lampstand, 3 million people who, by their own profession, are religiously unaffiliated. They're not Muslim, they're not Hindu, they're not Buddhist, and they're not Christ followers. And they are our mission field. For all that we've achieved in the past, and we have achieved so much, thank God for our heritage, but there is still much work to be done. There may be 99 safe in the fold, but the call of the Good Shepherd is for us to always be pursuing one more. One more. That may be your neighbor or your friend, or in Matt's case, it may be your brother. That may be your own son or daughter. I appreciate so much the heart of the layman who was interviewed yesterday on the video that we watched. As I shared with him in a session, I just heard him, the way I heard him express it was this: I discovered that my reason, Ken, I think something like this, Ken, that church is not about me. My job now as a grandparent is to make sure this church is ready to reach my grandchildren for Jesus. I just love that attitude. Church is no longer about me. It's what will it take for this church to be ready to reach my grandchildren for Jesus. The love of Christ compels us. Every lost person matters to God and must matter to us. Please, please let us not go through the motions. Let's not be content with a form of religion or settle for ministry without the power of God. Now, I understand you can't reach all 3 million. I can't reach all 3 million. But there is at least one more within your reach. There's always one more step we can take, one more unbeliever to invite into your circle of influence, one more skeptic who crosses the line of faith, one more new believer to be baptized, one more new believer to be discipled, one more disciple to be developed as a new leader, one more small group multiplying, one more church launching a new congregation to reach another zip code, one more zone planting a new kingdom community to reach new towns, new people groups, or the next generation. The question is, what risks will you take? What price will you pay? How far will you go? How long will you pray, Lord, please help me get one more? By the grace of God, we can. By the grace of God, we must, and by the grace of God, we will. I'm going to ask the ushers to pass out a commitment card here, and these are for the senior pastors, lead pastor in your church. If you would, there should be one for every lead pastor. As they're passing those out, I want to say a thanks. First of all, I'm just thankful to God for the opportunity to serve you, and I want to express my appreciation of a terrific team with whom I'm blessed to serve. Thanks to Reverend Mike Kola, Reverend Jason Tash, and Reverend Chris Williams, who served as regional assistant district superintendents. Thanks to Ms. Roxine Lowe and Ms. Raleigh Pedro, who both make such a valuable contribution to our team. Thank you to our district board members, especially Reverend Carol Skank and Mrs. Nancy Schoonmaker, who are our district treasurer, who all served with excellence in this inaugural year. And my deepest appreciation goes to Sherry, my wife, best friend, and partner in ministry, and to God goes all the glory. But I'm not interested in just giving another report and filing it in the manila folder somewhere. What I want us to talk about this morning is, what's the one more? If you prayed the prayer of Desmond Doss and said, please, Lord, help me get one more, what's going to be the one more for your church? And what I want to ask you to do, senior pastor, maybe you're not sitting with your delegates. If you're not, I'd like to ask you to move and find them. If you are sitting with your delegates, I want you to just kind of scrunch in a little bit, or if you have to stand up to get close enough. But I want you to talk, first of all, just pray and say, God, what's the one more? What is it you want us to? What's the big ask? What's the big step of faith that we need to take this year to reach one more? Maybe it's one more person. Maybe it's scheduling another baptism service. Maybe it's we're going to start a new service, or we're going to start another small group, or we're going to launch out and do a ministry in that prison or in that nursing. We're going to do something this year. What's the big step? Maybe you've already decided as a congregation and you just want to reaffirm it. Maybe you haven't prayed the prayer yet. Lord, please help us get one more. And you'd be willing to write that down. So there'll be some music playing soft in the background. I want you to find your team, huddle up, pray for us, Lord, help us to get one more. And then answer on this card, what is that one more? And then we'll give you a next step. So please move, find your team. What is the one more? Lord, please, please, one more.